No introduction today?
No, of course. All right. Well, hey, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name's Jasper. I work with SCORE Maine and I'm joined by Danielle Nemeth today. She is a mentor with SCORE and an expert on hiring your first employees and all things HR. If you didn't know already, SCORE is a resource partner of the SBA, and we help clients at all stages of their business's life from open to close. And we look forward to taking your questions today on this invaluable topic. Businesses can't, once they're at the point to have an employee, can't live without them. Please feel free to queue them up in the chat, or we can invite you to speak later down the line. And we are recording today, and the slides and recording will be sent out shortly after the end of the presentation. Danielle, why don't you take it away?
Okay, perfect. Hi, how are you? Thank you for joining. My name is Danielle, and I am an expert in the HR field. I have well over 25, it says 20, but it's like more like 25 years of experience. I've got my master's degree in organizational leadership and my bachelor's degree in human resource management. One of my favorite jobs ever is being a SCORE mentor. I am a volunteer. I'm not even touching my screen and it's just very touchy, so I apologize. Um, so again, I was born and raised in Lewiston, Maine. I am a Mainer, and I do have my own coaching and consulting business where I help small businesses grow the foundation of their businesses. What I mean by that is developing policies and procedures in place so employees have a clear understanding and expectations. They do job descriptions, things like that. But that is enough about me, and let's talk about why you're here. So we're going to talk today about the essentials of hiring. We're going to talk high level. There's a lot of detailed stuff here, but for the sake of time, we're going to be talking about a lot of high level topics. So just a high level overview, we're going to talk about EIN numbers, federal and state. We're going to talk about the cost and the cost of hiring. We'll talk about job descriptions and job classifications. We'll talk about employee handbooks and employee posters, all within the laws of Maine and the federal government as well. We'll talk about new hire paperwork and how to get organized with that. And then we'll talk, and then finally in the end, you'll be ready. You'll have all the information you need to actually hire your first employee with some knowledge of what you're getting into. So first, as sole entrepreneurs, a lot of times we can use our social security number as our business ID. But when we start talking about hiring an employee, we'll need to apply for an EIN number, and that's the social security number of your business. You'll need that number, and you'll need to register it both with federal and state. So that way you can pay taxes on your employees. You know where to pay taxes, and there's an expectation of you paying taxes on your employee. So when you get an EIN number, it's not only important to register it, you get it through the federal government website, but it's not only important, it's important to get that EIN, but it's also important to register it with Maine Revenue Services for taxation purposes, and then the Department of Labor as well. So there's two main businesses you have to register your EIN number with. So once you do that, let's start talking about the cost of hiring an employee, right? So the cost of hiring an employee is more than just the salary. Don't think that I can hire somebody at $15 an hour, and that's all that is. And you calculate your budget based on that, because there's a lot more that goes into hiring your employee. There are federal and state mandated laws that come with hiring an employee. And those are some of the mandated laws are like workers' comp insurance. So you have to also pay, again, workers' comp insurance for one or more employees. And there could be other benefits depending on the number of employees you have. Maine has the Maine Earned Paid Leave Law, where if you're 15 more employees, which I know you might not be there yet, but it's something to consider, you have to pay your employees 1 hour for every 40 hours worked, even if they're seasonal. Or even if they're part-time or even if they're per diem. So every 40 hours they work, here goes my screen again. For every 40 hours they work, you do have to pay them for that time. And then another law that's coming into effect is the main paid leave law act, which you'll start doing a 0.5% deduction for employers with 15 or more employees. The employee still has to pay the 0.5% deduction, but the employer would have to pay as well. So there's some things that are coming in 2025 just to be aware of and to consider when you're hiring your first employee and as your organization grows. So other miscellaneous costs is going to also be advertising for the job. It's going to be any administrative costs that may go with that, such as your time looking for a job description, looking for the right job. It could be equipment, hardware, your cell phone, laptops. Could be if they're going to be traveling, what mileage you're going to pay, what cost to process their payroll, and any other benefits that you may consider when hiring your employee. Like, are you going to pay them for holidays when a major holiday takes place? So those are all considerations when hiring an employee. And then additional costs to cover. So when you're hiring an employee, you want them to come into an organized business, right? You want them to know what they're getting into. You want them to know what's available. And you also want to set expectations for those employees. So some of the additional cost things to consider is creating an employee handbook, or at least a code of conduct for employees, creating clear expectations, policies or procedures, and have them in one place so they know what you're expecting from them as an employer. And have your employee handbook or your code of conduct outline what culture do you want, what values does your business want, and those employees need to model what your business culture is, because that's really, an employee can either make or break your business depending on how their demeanor. They could be mean to somebody on the phone as customer service. So you really want to make sure they have clear mission or clear statement of your culture and values. Legal compliance, right? There's some legal compliances that go around hiring your first employee. Everybody needs sexual harassment training. You as a manager would need sexual harassment training, and then your employee needs sexual harassment training. That is a federal law, and they have to have that annually, at least some kind of acknowledgement form in their file. You want to have a complaint process, or there is a complaint process affiliated with the sexual harassment laws that they need to know. So you want to make sure those things are in place too. And then again, standardizing and consistent processes. Compensation, benefits, PTO, and then safety are additional things to think about when you're hiring. Is that person going to be working in a construction site? So what are the safety things that they need? What's the PPE things that they are going to need? Or what kind of education will they need that goes with the job that you want to hire for? Then additional considerations is how you're going to pay the employees. And what I mean by that is, are you going to use a payroll service, or are you planning to be do payroll? And if so, how are you planning to deduct taxes? And how are you planning to charge benefits or pay those benefits? And then when we talk about benefits, also again, here goes my screen again, sorry. I'm not even touching it, but when we talk about benefits, you want to make sure your employee has a benefit summary. As a consultant, I go into businesses, and some of the employees don't even know that they could have dental insurance, and the employer offers it because there's not a place where it's written down where their benefits are available to them. And then, you want to make sure that how you're going to handle different things, like if you get wage garnishments on the employees, if they have child support, like how are you going to handle those things? You want to make sure that you have all of these details tied up before you actually hire your first employee. And we'll move on. So in addition to all of those taxes, all of those benefits to think about, there are some federal laws that you have to comply with. And some of those, it's easy. It's a poster. You need posters when you hire an employee. Every employee needs to be notified of their rights, both federal and state rights, state law rights. And so once you hire an employee, you need to have posters or notices of the laws in your break rooms. You can go onto different websites and pull the laws, but I recommend just buying posters. The posters are like $50. It has like one poster with 10 laws on it, and you're good to go. But you can go onto different websites. Just make sure you don't miss a website and the laws that need to be posted are posted. And some of those laws are from the Fair Standard Labor Act, right? That's about compensation. Employees need to know what their rights are and how compensation and what the compensation laws are. There's the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA laws that have to be posted in your place of employment, as well as OSHA laws. Those posters need to be placed as well. I work with a construction client. They have no posters, no OSHA posters, and nothing was posted. So in order for them to be compliant, they went and bought the posters and posted them in their break room where all the employees can see. So those are just some little nuances that you really need to consider when hiring your employee. Workers' compensation is also needs to be posted, child labor laws, equal pay. And again, we already talked kind of about the main earned paid leave law, but that is something that needs to be posted when you hire employees as well. So once you have, I'm going to do kind of an overview because there is a lot of information. So you're going to apply for that EIN number. You're going to think about the cost of hiring. You're going to think about the additional cost of the structure you need to have in place before you hire that employee. You're going to set up some posters or go and print off some labor posters, making sure that the employees are aware of all of the laws that they are entitled to. And then from there, we'll move into the stages of hiring, right? So you have all of these things in place. You have a solid foundation, right, before you bring employees on. So what are we going to do now? We're going to talk about posting the position. We're going to talk about screening candidates. We're going to talk about interviewing candidates and making the best selection. And then once you decide on a candidate, we'll talk about the offer. All right, so we're going to start with recruiting, and we're going to do it wisely because we want a star candidate. So the oh, here we go again. Again, I apologize. I'm not even touching my screen, to be honest with you. So recruiting wisely, the hiring process. So we need to identify the position, right? That position should be everything you hate to do. If you hate doing paperwork, if you hate doing payroll, then that's what you want to hire those people in who do those things well. Hire people who do things well that you don't do. So that way you're doing well on what you're an expertise in, and then you have that person to help you make your business shine. So really kind of identify those job responsibilities, right? If I want someone to come in and do payroll, then what does that look like and how is that broken down? And then you want to create a job description around those jobs that you're hiring them for. If you want to hire someone to come in and do sales, then make sure that their job description is reflected on the sales position. I recommend that you look at job descriptions on various websites and take a look at their functions and just determine how you want to structure your job description. Job descriptions are very important and they become a legal document in the employee's file. So you want to really think about the functions and how that job description is structured. And then once that job description is structured, we want to talk about interviewing questions, posting the ads. We want to talk about conducting interviews, selecting the best candidate for the position, negotiating and accepting the offer, the background check, and onboarding. And we're going to get into these topics a little bit deeper. That's just kind of high level of the next step that we're about to dive into. So the job application. So you want to make sure that you've got the job description, but you want to make sure that you have a job application that they can apply for the position. There's a couple of things with the job application. There's a law called Ban the Box where you cannot ask about criminal history. You can't ask about it in the job interview, and you can't ask on the job description. There are a few exemptions to that, but for the most part, if you have a job that doesn't require financial or doesn't require medical, you pretty much can't ask about those things. The way you find out, or the way to get around that, is once you make a job offer, then you run the background. You want to make sure your job offer is contingent on the background check. And then so you would run a background check. If something comes back, then you could rescind the offer. And that's that's the purpose of the ban in the box, is not to eliminate candidates right off the bat who have a criminal background. So that's, again, how you would get around that if you really need to have somebody who has a clean record. I know there's this question. I think there's going to be a Q&A at the end of the session, but I'm more than happy if Jasper wants to jump in. If somebody has questions now, if they want to jump in, then I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Yeah, sure, Kathy. Why don't you go
Yeah,
ahead?
I'm one of these old ager ones that will get to the end and then I'll forget what I wanted to say, so I raised my hand. My question was on the background checks and stuff like that. If you have a situation where you're going to have children around at different times, is it okay to ask if they have some kind of a background where they have a sexual predator charge on them,
Yeah,
where
so
they couldn't work in that position?
Yeah, there are a few exceptions. There are a few exceptions. And so you just need to make sure that your industry is one of those exceptions. If they're working with children, if they're working with financials, if they're working in a heavy security position, those are not included in the ban in the box laws. But anything else, if you're a cook, or you have a restaurant, or you have a retail store, or anything else, a farm, those are the industries you're not allowed to ask the questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It was a good question.
Yeah, we did have one in the chat that I think might be good to touch on before we get much further. The other one, I believe we may get to in a later section. But Jen was wondering, what do you do about the employee rights posters for remote employees?
I'm sorry, what was the question again? The posters?
So yeah, for the employee rights posters, what do you do if your employees are all remote?
So that is a good question. They do, if you go to I have nothing to do with JJ Keller, but if you go to JJ Keller, they offer virtual posters, and you can send those posters out virtually. And so just make sure that you have records of sending out those posters virtually.
Great to hear. And Jacqueline is wondering where are some places you recommend for posting jobs. I believe we may come up on that soon.
Yeah, so of course, Indeed is like the best place to post jobs, but Indeed is very expensive. And then you have ZipRecruiter, which is also gaining a lot of popularity, and then LinkedIn, but those are also very expensive. I would utilize the career centers in your town. The career centers are free. They will post on their website. A lot of times those jobs will be scraped onto other websites. So the career center is a good option to utilize for posting positions. If you have like a target market on your employees, so if you want to hire predominantly high school students, because you have a seasonal retail business, then of course those schools are those where the kids would hang out, or the high school students would hang out. So if you have that target market, then find out what their interest is. As a recruiter, I always was looking at, where is my population hanging out? Where can I meet people? Where can I pass out my business cards? Where do I find good customer service? A lot of times as a recruiter, I would go to Walmart, and if I got great customer service, I would hand them my business card and say, hey, you've got great customer service. You know, if you're interested in working for me or for this company, you know, please apply for a position. I got quite a bit of candidates doing that. So that, you know, just stock up on the business cards and do that. But advertising positions can be expensive if you hit Indeed or ZipRecruiter, or LinkedIn. You know, it all depends on what you want for the position. But the career centers are good choices. And then just try to think social media, right? There's a lot of groups on social media. I'm in some consulting groups. I'm in some HR groups. You know, if you think about that, like, for example, as one of my target clients is construction businesses, because there's a lot of them and they're new and upcoming. So I'll go on those social media groups and I'll look for those businesses or those employees to try to network with them, to try to get them to engage with me. It's from a client perspective, but it would be from a hiring perspective.
Great insight on that. And why don't we keep things rolling here?
Perfect. All right, so we're going to start talking about job descriptions. Your job description should include job classifications. It should include whether the employee is exempt or non-exempt. Very important, is a question that comes up a lot when we do these presentations, and I'm going to touch it a little bit more in the next slide, just at a high level. You want the employee to understand what they're going to do. So you want them to have the job summary, a high level overview, a couple sentences of what they're going to do. You know, you're going to do sales for this product. Job responsibilities, exactly what are they going to do? What are the primary job functions? It should specifically be for the daily task of every day. You know, it would be do reports, go door to door if it's a sales position, you know, that type, specific to the job. Then you want the qualifications. Qualifications are your education. List what type of education you want them to have and what kind of experience. So I want somebody with a bachelor's degree with 4 years of experience in sales doing HR. And I'm only saying HR because that's my business. And then you want to let them know exactly what type of work environment they're going to be sitting in. Are they going to be sitting all day? So if I was looking for a telesales person, I might say you'd be on the computer all day, sitting for 8 hours a day. If it was a standing position, it would be standing for 8 hours a day. And then a minimum of, you have to lift 20 pounds, and really think about that. And when you're getting the poundages, or you're getting information for like pushing, pulling, lifting, the work environment, I would recommend going to like the OSHA website and determining what the limits are, because some positions do have limits. Nursing has a 35 pound limit. So those are some things to really think about. And then lastly, make sure that they know who they're reporting to. So add the manager to the job description. It doesn't have to be a name. It could say you're going to be reporting to the HR department manager, or the CEO of the company. So those are some elements of the job description. You want to make sure this format that I have right here is actually how I list my jobs when I create job descriptions for companies. Is we have the hiring manager, the specific jobs that they're going to do, their responsibilities, the qualifications, and then the physical attributes of the position. All right, so one of the big questions comes up in this seminar often is exempt job classifications. And this job classifications fall under the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is known as FSLA. And the FSLA says that you have to determine if you're going to pay an employee overtime or not overtime. Are they hourly or salary? And how do you determine that? There is a test that you have to think about when you're determining if your employees are paid hourly or salary. And that test is what is the level of supervision? How much money are they making? So and I'm on number 2, we're talking about number 2, because we'll get into independent contractors too, which is another hot topic that comes up. So exempt employees, non-exempt employees have to be paid overtime. If they work 40 hours a week, they must be paid overtime. I had an organization that I worked with, and I found out that all their employees who worked over 40 hours a week were just being paid at regular salary. No, they have to be paid time and a half. It's the law. So any hourly employee must be paid overtime. What is an hourly employee? An hourly employee is somebody who really works your business, somebody who cuts widgets, somebody who is processing things. They're not making sound decisions. They're not making hiring decisions. They're not making budgeting decisions. So those criteria are for salary. So salary, you don't have to pay them overtime. However, there are criteria they have to meet there as well. Salaried employees typically are your professionals. They're your managers. They're your supervisors. They're making decisions. They're making hiring, firing, doing performance evaluations. They might be managing a budget, a department budget. So those are some key things to think about when you're determining if your position is hourly or salary. You have somebody who is just coming in, they're going to be cutting pieces of paper or standing there running a manufacturing line, definitely an hourly employee. If you have somebody who's saying, yep, I want to hire this person, the budget is this, we're going to spend so many dollars doing this and so many dollars doing that, they're making a financial impact on your business and they are salary. So that's kind of a very high level, but it's really kind of the best way to explain it. Independent contractors versus employees. Your employees are paid by you. You have direct control over what they do. You have control over the hours. They're working 8 to 4:30. They're going to receive a consistent paycheck from week to week. They're eligible for benefits. Those are your employees. Your independent contractors, you cannot have a say in their employees. You can say, hey, I need you to come from 8 to 4:30, but they have to be able to work with the flexibility of their own time. So as a consultant, or if you want to hire me as a 1099 and you say, hey, I need you Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, I'll be like, great, I can do that. But be aware that I'm working with other clients and I might need flexibility to go see my other clients. And that's kind of how you determine it. I'm making my own hours. I'm making the decision. You're presenting the 8 to 5 to me. I'm saying yes. It's my decision to say yes, but you don't really have that control over whether you're going to fire me or rate me up because I'm going to leave at 4:30 or at 12:30 to go see another client. I have that flexibility. So hopefully that all makes sense. Very important, because if you're classifying wrong, it can impact you financially if somebody makes a complaint against you with DOL or the FSLA or any, the EEOC. You could be paying fines, and obviously business is expensive enough. We don't want you to be paying fines. Any questions whatsoever, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. I can get more in depth on some of these some of this with you. If you really need a deeper dive into this, I'll be happy to do it as a SCORE through SCORE, as a free mentor. But really think about classifying your employees correctly and think about paying them overtime when they should be paid overtime. Okay. There, we have our posters, we have our application all set, we have our job description all set. We are now going to post the position. And like we talked about a little bit earlier, where are we going to post the position? And again, I already talked about posting ads. You could post ads on social media. You can post ads with the Career Center, which is a free option. If you want the expensive option of Indeed, you can do that too. It's expensive, but you can do that too. I've seen jobs posted on Craigslist. I don't know how effective it is, but there are different options you can post. All right, so now you've posted your position. You have a couple of candidates and you want to do the interview process. There are some guidelines around the interview process. And you need to really stick to these guidelines, because if you start asking personal things, one of the general overall rule that I say to people is just don't ask anything personal. You know, you can say, how's the weather? The weather's great, but don't ask about children. Don't ask about they might be walking with a limp. Don't ask about their family. Don't ask about anything like that. Here's my screen goes again. Because it could be construed as discrimination. And there are court cases where people have not gotten the job. And in the interview process, they talked about their children, they talked about the disability, and now they're saying they didn't get the job because the employer discriminated against me because I have children or because of my disability. So stay clear of asking anything to do with personal information, right? So just focus on the relevance of the job description. Look at your job description, create questions around those core functions that we talked about. Ask behavioral-based interview questions. If you ask questions, think about how you want it to be answered. If your question is a yes, no, you're really not going to get a lot of information out of those candidates. So what you want to do is ask behavioral based. You want it to start with, tell me about a time when you met these goals. Tell me about a time where you were awarded your biggest sales. Describe a time when you failed at XYZ. Those are questions that are open-ended, where people will talk about that specific situation and how they conquered that situation. Yes, no won't get you anywhere. You can say, do you like to do sales? Yes. That's it. Tell me about a time where you hit your sales goals or you achieved your sales goals. And then they'll be like, well, 2 years ago I did XYZ and this is how I did it. And that's what you want. You want to gather that information. So again, illegal questions to ask is anything about their personal life, personal characteristics. You're not a natural blonde, are you? We don't really, that doesn't relate to the job, right? It doesn't whatsoever. Don't ask about past wages. That's something new. You can't say to them, so what were you making at your last job? You can say, what are your salary expectations, to try to get an idea of, can you pay within what they're expecting to make or hoping to make? But you can't ask, how much did you make at that job? What were you paid? What were your commissions? That's irrelevant to your job. So make sure it's strictly about your job and the range that you're thinking about in your mind of paying. Again, don't ask anything that that has to do with criminal convictions during the interview process. That will come in time in the background check unless you are one of these elite categories. And the other thing is you don't want to say, how old are you? You don't want to ask, are you half black? Are you white? You don't want to ask that. You don't want to ask about gender. Nowadays, there's a lot of transgender happening. You don't want to ask, are you a boy? Are you a girl? It doesn't have to do with the job. You want to stay specific to the job. So don't ask about race. Don't ask about gender. Don't ask about religion. It doesn't matter. It only matters if you're hiring somebody to work in your church, maybe, but don't ask about their national origin. Don't ask if they're married. Don't ask if they're pregnant. Don't ask if they have a disability, nothing to do with the job. And all of those questions can put you in a court. So be very careful when you are planning your interview strategy. All right, so be prepared when you're going into the interview process. Be prepared, have a good understanding of your job, have your application, the application or the resume in front of you so you can discuss their qualifications of what they did. Have a list of behavioral questions to ask. Make sure that you take notes. Notes are a legal document. So when you take notes, don't doodle on your notes. Don't make faces on your notes. Don't say no with a big arrow pointing to whatever it is. Just take notes of exactly what they say. Because once you start taking notes, it could be misconstrued, and it could be, if you end up in a court, they could say you weren't paying attention, or those notes meant this little note could have been that it was racist, depending on what it is, or if you were doodling, then were you really paying attention to the candidate? So there's a lot of different things that you could do that could be misconstrued. So I would not doodle, or I would not make side notes, just make notes of exactly what was said. If the candidate said, I grossed $15,000 in sales, then write candidate, $15,000 in sales. If the candidate says, I investigated 3 sexual harassment cases, then write that. Don't write anything else other than the facts of what's coming out of their mouth. Because again, they are legal documents. When you're in the interview process, make sure the candidate's doing the most of the talking. Oftentimes, an interviewer will do most of the talking, and that's not what it should be. Yes, you should tell them about your business, but the majority of the conversation should come from them. That's a good interview. That's when you're learning about them and their skills. Yes, you want a little portion that they can learn about you and your job, but the majority of that interview should be them talking. Okay, so then you've got your candidates, you interviewed them, and now we're going to select the best candidate. Consider long-term fit. How is this person really going to grow in your position? How are they going to grow in your business? And once you determine who you want to hire, extend the offer, run the background, do your references. Again, in Maine, you must extend the offer before you run a background check. So if you're in that industry and you really want to run a background check before you make the offer, you can't. You have to make the offer. Just make sure that in your offer letter, it states that this offer can be rescinded based on passing a clear background, or in order for this offer to be valid, you have to pass a clear background. Otherwise, you're rescinding the offer. And then communicate to the candidates, all of the candidates, whether they were hired or not. It's common courtesy. Don't ghost anybody. Let them know that they weren't selected. Send them an email. Or, I personally like the phone call. They spent that time coming into your office and speaking to you. So it's best to call, but 90% of the people will send an email saying, sorry, we selected another candidate, which is fine. And if you are calling them and they're asking why, you just say, you know, we selected someone with a little bit more skill set. You were great, but sent someone with a little bit more skill set. Don't elaborate too much into it. All right, so now your person is hired and you're preparing for day one, right? This is day one. We did all of this hard work getting ready for day one, the person showing up for day one. So on day one, be organized when that person walks in. You want them to walk into an environment that makes you look like you're a competent employer. Have a checklist ready, and we're going to give you a free checklist, and you can modify it any way you want to modify it. But this is kind of a high-level overview, is tell them about the history, tell them about your missions and your values and your culture. Even if they're your first employee, tell them what you want your culture to be like. I want a great culture. I want friendly customer service. I want to go the extra mile. Make sure your offer letter has their start date, their job title, that they are exempt or non-exempt, and what their salary is, whether it's hourly or yearly or annually. And then have them sign that, because that's part of their employment record. And then have them fill out your W-2. This is really an old screen because I've got 2023. I've got to update this, but have them fill out the 2024. We're soon going into 2025, so have them fill out their W-2s. Have them fill out the I-9 eligibility. That is the form that says that they can work in the United States. That's a passport they need, their driver's license, social security card. They need either one or two of the other. And if you look on the back of that form, there's 3 columns that tell you exactly what they need in order to pass the test of being able to work in the United States. Offer them direct deposit if you can. That's best for your payroll, or you tell them it's going to be a check, however you're going to pay, but just make sure they know. Have an employee handbook ready. Have them sign the acknowledgement form that they got that employee handbook, because that employee handbook is going to list your culture. It's going to list your expectations. It's going to list some policies, and you want them to read it and you want them to acknowledge it, part of the employment file. Have a list of benefits that you're offering. Even if you can't offer much, just say, we're going to offer, you know, you're entitled to workers' comp, you're entitled to STD, which is short-term disability, whatever little benefits that you may be offered. I always like to tell employers, if you can't offer medical, at least put a blurb in saying, you know, you can find benefits on the marketplace. We're so sorry we can't offer benefits or medical benefits, but if you go to the marketplace, there's some benefits there. So give them an option on where to find benefits if you don't offer benefits. Make sure that if they have safety policy, the policies, any IT policies, like I can't, you know, go shopping on your network, on the internet, you know, those type of things. Make sure you're clear with that, and then let them know what's going to happen after orientation is done. Who are they going to report to, and what does their training structure look like? So let's give you a summary of what we talked about with this session, because we covered a lot and we covered it at a high level. To prepare to hire your first employee, you're going to apply for an EIN number. You're going to consider having policies, payroll, and benefits in line before you hire that employee. You're going to think about the hiring process, right? Which includes your job description, your applications, your job postings, thinking about the legalities of what you should be posting, how you should be interviewing. You'll think about the selection process. You'll make the offer with a verbal offer followed up by an offer letter. And then they're going to start on day one in an organized process. That is very high level. Again, my name is Danielle. I am a SCORE mentor. I also have a consulting company. If you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer any questions as a SCORE mentor at no cost. And that is it. So we're now be happy to take any other questions people may have.
We have a few great ones in the queue. We'll start off with Marlene's, wondering if you can record an interview.
You would have to get permission from the candidate to record the interview.
Gotcha. Allison Malloy is wondering, is it okay to say you need a substance-free workplace that excludes the use of marijuana, even if they have a medical card?
Absolutely. Marijuana isn't recognized federally. So if you don't want an employee to use marijuana, you could be running a recovery center. So you can absolutely make it a condition of employment that they have to pass a drug test as part of the condition of employment, and that you don't accept medical marijuana cards. Absolutely.
Jesse Mead on interview questions. As far as questions that are allowed, if the job requires someone to be physically robust, how would you go about, I would say, asking that question if it's allowed?
It is allowed. You could say, so if you, let's just say you want to hire a construction worker, you can say must be able to lift 50 pounds up overhead to the side. Now you have to make sure that, there's some OSHA standards, right? You don't want employees getting hurt, but if they need to lift a certain amount of weight, I would go to the OSHA website just to check the job, but you can put in your job description, must be able to lift 50 pounds overhead, or must be able to push and pull 50 pounds, or it could be 100 pounds, but you want to make sure that you're complying with OSHA laws when it comes to that.
Absolutely. And Allison has another question. If you know a candidate may have a lot of headaches or need a flexible schedule, is that need for flexibility an appropriate reason to hire someone as a contractor rather than an employee?
So if somebody has a medical condition, right, that can fall under ADA, right, with the Americans with Disability Act. And it could be considered discrimination if you don't hire that knowing. But if they're willing to be a 1099 employee, or if they're willing to be a temporary employee, and you can work around that, then that's fine. When they're an actual employee of yours, and they say they need that flexibility, that falls under ADA, and that's a whole other conversation. And you can reach out to me one-on-one, and I'll be happy to help you with that question.
And Kathy with another one back to earlier question about a no smoking or drinking on premises policy. I believe that kind of would go without saying for a lot of businesses.
Right, absolutely. And though that's what you want in your employee handbook, right? Or you want a policy saying you're a drug-free facility. And see, these are the reasons why you want these things in place, right? Before you hire an employee, you want them to sign off saying they knew the policy. So if you catch them smoking or drinking, you can revert to your disciplinary process, which is your performance management process. Right. And so that's why a lot of times to have an employee handbook right off the get-go is so important, that employees, was clear communication. They sign the acknowledgement form. They know you have a drug-free policy, a no smoking policy. And if you catch them doing that, then you go down your progressive disciplinary process, which is whether it's a coaching, a verbal warning, however you want to discipline them.
Awesome. And one more, we've got one from Angela McLean. I'm wondering if an employer can forbid an employee from accepting tips.
I'm sorry, repeat that question.
Can an employer forbid the employee from accepting tips? I would say gratuity.
Yes, you can if they're a flat rate. So, I'd want to know I'd want to do a deeper dive into that with you. But if you are, cashier at Walmart, no, they can't. They don't need tips. If you're paying meeting the wages that are required by Maine state law or federal law, tipping can be you don't have to have tipping. The problem becomes if you have a tip jar, right? Or if you say tips are acceptable and then you're not giving them the tips, then that could be a problem. But overall, if you forbid employees to take tips because you're hiring them at the wage that meets federal and state law, then you can require no tipping. Just make sure that you have a sign saying no tipping if that's possible.
Gotcha. One more coming in. From Teresa. I have a worker that wants to be 1099, and they carry their own insurance, but they do have the same schedule every week. I'm not sure is there some further clarification, Teresa? I'm not sure what the question is.
So I think I know. So
Hmm.
she's basically, so it's an agreement you made with the employee there. If they're 1099 and they're working in your business, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 to 5, it's an agreement, but they can leave the business. They can leave, let's just say if you have them 8 to 5 and they have to go see somebody else at 12:30, you're not disciplining them. That's their schedule. I mean, that's their option, is to leave the business because they are 1099 and they have that. That's part of the requirement of 1099, is that they manage their own schedule. You can say, I need you can call me up and you can say, I need a consultant to be on site Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 to 5. Okay, we can do that. But if I have an appointment at one day, if I have an appointment at 2 in the afternoon, I'm going to leave. I'll let you know out of courtesy, but I'm going to leave. And really, you can't give me any discipline about it, or you can't give me any trouble about it, because, I'm an independent contractor and that's for me to manage. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it looks like Teresa provided a little more information, wondering if it's legal for them to be a 1099 rather than an employee, given that they have the same set schedule.
And again, it's all in the agreement, right? If they're 1099, they have to have that flexibility. They manage themselves. They set their own schedule. And even though you agreed upon a schedule, they still manage themselves. You're not writing performance evaluations on them. You're not setting their wages of, yes, we're going to agree to $50 an hour, right? Because that's 1099 and you're paying them for their expertise. And that's just, a fictitious number, but you're not cutting their payroll, saying, you're making $20 an hour and I'm taking taxes out of you and you're doing any of that benefits. They have to be able to, they manage all of that on their own. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah, important information to have on a 1099. And one more question on 1099s. Is there a more specific definition of 1099 versus employee? Allison would like to hire someone 10 hours a week that they can do their work flexibly, especially given their known variable energy level. Their CPA says if you tell someone what to do and when to do it, they're an employee. If someone's has a flexible schedule, is that enough for a 1099?
No, it can be a 1099. So we're actually in 2025 going to be doing a more in-depth detail on 1099. But you can, it's just, again, having that agreement with them. Again, how are they managing the schedule? How are you paying them? Or, are they paying their own taxes? Are they claiming it as their own business? There's a lot that goes into it, but you can certainly have an agreement with them. But if you're paying their payroll taxes and you're paying their benefits and all of that, then they're really not a 1099.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I would definitely say keep your eyes peeled, everyone, for the next workshop that Danielle just mentioned. We are doing a deeper dive into it.
Yeah, in 2025, because it's a
Yeah,
common question that comes up every single time we do this webinar.
for a good reason, I would say. It's a hot
Yeah,
topic.
it is a
All
hot
right.
topic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, anyone else have any more questions before we wrap things up today? All right.
And
Well,
my SCORE email is here, so you can reach out to me via SCORE. We'll be sending out the presentation and a checklist.
all right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I want to thank Danielle once more for putting on this presentation. Hiring your employee is, it's a scary topic sometimes, but we appreciate your insight on it. And if everyone didn't already know, SCORE is a free nonprofit service for business mentoring. And if you don't already have a mentor, you should apply for one at score.org. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. And thanks again, Danielle, for putting on a great presentation.
Bye. Thank you for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.